We're very fortunate to have Anne-Marie Tipper here with us today. Thank you very much for coming, Anne-Marie.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Now, you've been a play therapist for very many years, but before we start talking specifically about play therapy, could you start by explaining a little bit about the importance of play in general for the development of children?
Yeah, play is, it's their language. We don't need to worry about dialects and different countries because in every single country, children speak play. Through play, they make sense of their world. They show you what they're experiencing in it. They learn social boundaries and they learn the skills of communicating. And it's really sad when children have missed out on that huge developmental stage.
Okay. And so play therapy, I presume from what you're saying, has been developed and designed to help children that have missed out on that stage. So can you tell us about, give us an overview of what play therapy is and where it comes from?
Yeah, play therapy, it's not just for children who've missed out on that stage, it's a relationship therapy. And it's built on the principles of a woman called Virginia Axline, who is, everything is about accepting the child as is. So, for example, if a child comes into a therapy session very tearful or very angry, we would just work with that energy. We wouldn't try and adjust them in any way. We don't judge the children. I think the biggest thing about play therapy is you don't have to ever have a conversation with a child. They never have to tell you what's on their mind. They will play it out. They'll use different media in the playroom to show you what's happening. And I think that's the magic, because there's a huge expectation nowadays that people will engage and have a conversation about what's troubling them. I think the magic of play therapy is sometimes the children don't know what their issue is. We will often get referrals from children. Back in the UK, we're very obsessed with behaviour. It's always behaviour that brings the child to us. And so we might be sent a child to work with who is disruptive in class or not engaging or just not learning. And through non-directive play, where the child takes the lead, you'll discover that there's possibly abuse at home, big traumas in their life. Your aim is always that they feel confident enough to share something with you if they're in danger. And my experience is that that happens many times. So, but it's the relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you just tell us what what your play therapy room looks like?
My play therapy room is full of amazing, wonderful, magical toys that we give the children so many different media to use. I laugh when I say they're magical toys because every single toy in the playroom becomes something different for each child. So in my playroom, I do have sand play. So we use a sand tray. I've actually done my qualification as a sand play therapist as well. And we will invite the child to just bring their world using miniature figures. I think I'm quite obsessed by miniature figures. I have many thousands.
Right.
And they will just bring their world to life in the boundaries and the safety of a sand tray. We use music, we use dance.
Right.
That's really scary. We use singing, and it's nice nobody's there because I can't sing, but it doesn't matter in that relationship. We use an awful lot of art and creative materials. Children will always find what they want to do, and sometimes they do just come in and talk, and that's strange when it happens.
Right.
So, and sometimes it's that they believe there's an expectation of what happens in a session that maybe a parent or a teacher will have said to them, you need to go and tell Anne-Marie your problems.
Okay.
So, so then we just help them to get into the play because that's where they do their healing.
You spoke earlier about a child possibly coming into the session in tears, and you said, and we work with that.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about what is it that you do if that child walks through the door in tears? What then happens?
Okay, probably best if I talk about a case rather than...
Yes, that would be interesting.
I have a young girl I work with at home who has had multiple traumas in her life, and she was referred to me because she wouldn't wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't engage, and just sat in the back of the classroom doing nothing. And again, I think her expectation of coming to play therapy was she would have to talk to me. So her very first session, she just walked through the door in total silent tears, which was just overwhelming. You know, the energy she brought in with her was one of pure sadness and fear. I mean, it always comes from fear. So I would just sit there, and we sat very quietly, and I just reflected how I felt, the energy she was bringing in, and I just reassured her what wasn't expected of her. I think we do a terrible thing with children where we give them rules and we tell them what we want from them. I wanted to put her at ease of what we didn't expect from her. And I just acknowledged her tears, and for the first session she cried for probably half an hour. The second session she came in looking very sad. By the third session she was skipping in, and she shared that she had nobody had ever noticed her before. Nobody had ever given her that time, and they always wanted to know why she was crying and never allowed her to just cry. So it's very powerful to just to literally accept the child and have no expectations. So,
Right.
yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And we've been talking about children. Who can benefit from play therapy?
Oh, play therapy is great. Play therapy, I think really you probably would start play therapy around 3 or 4. Before that, I would use a different intervention of maybe filial therapy, which is, would you like me to explain
Yes, I
filial
would, please,
therapy?
thank you.
Filial therapy is where we work with the parent, often the mother, and we teach her non-directive play skills and limit setting, so she does those skills with her child herself. That brings the attachment between the mother and child rather than the child and therapist.
Right.
And that works brilliantly from probably tiny babies up until 12. But play therapy, I use play therapy with adults. Play therapy is great because actually the one thing we really need to do in our lives is play. As adults, that's our relationship stuff. We're playful with people, we use our personality, and that's all we do in play therapy. So, yeah.
And is there any difference between a session with a child, play therapy with a child, and a play therapy session with an adult?
No, not really.
No?
I think possibly when adults first start in play therapy, they feel very awkward, and once they realise they're not judged in there, their inner child comes out.
Right.
And I think probably the bit I'm so passionate about is teenage boys. Teenage boys, they seem to be the core of my work.
Really?
Yeah, we have a lot of boys referred to us, and I worked in a setting where I think I was working with about 20 different boys, and we worked out, you know, play therapy, for goodness sake. Play at 16 is no good. So we worked about what to call it, and they came up, they were going to call it chill out time. And then every time I walked through the setting, they'd say, "Hi, Anne-Marie, I've got play therapy later." So they just loved it. They just, you know, and I think again, it's our expectation of what children want. And actually they wanted to play, and they wanted to make sense of their lives. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. And so how can you tell, you've already mentioned success stories as you've been talking. How do you know when play therapy is working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think play therapy, it's about trusting the process. And I think when many play therapists start out, they're looking for pleasing the organisations that have referred the children. So they're looking for change. Actually, you have to work an awful lot on the sense of the sessions. If a child is referred to us because they've been sexually abused and we know about it, you'll notice that they'll play out scenarios of being scared, of being controlled, and it'll come in lots of different ways. It'll be, you know, maybe with animals, maybe with soldiers, maybe in role play. And
sorry, can I interrupt you there and tell you? Could you just explain a little bit more detail what that child might be doing with those animals?
Okay,
or those,
yeah. Again, probably better if I talk about a particular
case.
child. I worked with a young boy who was, I think he was 6 when he was referred to me. And he'd been a victim of horrific sexual abuse by 2 teenage boys. And I worked with him for probably 8 months. In that time, he never, ever talked about what had happened. But everything he did would be about conflict. So he would have armies of animals, where you would have the big fierce animals, the lions and the tigers and the bears in one team, and then against that there would be the rabbits and the dogs and the cats. So and he would literally fight them out. They would be and together, you know, I would join in his play, and there would be this real sense of you can't win. If you're small, you can't win. The big stuff always wins. He would also use armies of soldiers to do the different thing, and through our months of being together, he started to be able to make sense that actually you could win. He did have power in his life. He was a good enough person. So it was the day when the rabbit beat the tiger that I knew that he was making his progress.
Right.
I can't measure that. I can't, you know, we do data to measure it, but actually those experiences of just seeing his face. He also played out scenarios about his mother, who he had huge hatred towards, and he would do these, everything was about mothers letting him down, and through his play we made sense that actually it was his mother that took him to the hospital when he had been abused, and he thought that she had agreed to the doctors repeating the abuse, and that he never spoke of it, but it came out in everything he played. And at the end, I think it was about 4 sessions from the end, he stopped playing, and he was the wildest child. He used to wear me out in his sessions. He stopped playing and he said, "I don't know what you've done, but your magic's worked. I like me again." Oh. Lots of tears. Lots of tears. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So and you know, they're not all as dramatic as that, but you always see the shift for children. Yeah.
So what sort of skills do you need to be a good play therapist?
I think you have to like people. And that sounds so obvious, but I think when you go through training, you can see people that might be successful and you can see people that might struggle. It is about the child. It's always about the child. I think you have to be brave enough to show emotions, but solid enough to hold safe boundaries for the child. It's no good if we take everything of ourselves into the session and we overwhelm it with our feelings of anxiety. I believe that tears belong in a therapy session in the same way as laughter does, and I think there's something very sad when therapists can't show their emotion and their reaction to something really sad or really dangerous. I think you have to also understand the theory behind it. I think one of my pet hates is people who go on a 5-day course and call themselves a play therapist. You know, it's a long process, and without the theory, nothing makes sense. It just becomes just playing, and it has a therapeutic element. But when you understand the processes and where it comes from,
when there's more intentionality, and understanding. Okay, so on to our last question, which I have to read because it's a pretty long one, and it's about the Millennium Development Goals, which I know you know about, and that the existing goals have clear targets in areas such as improving access to primary education, reducing hunger, etc. But there's nothing actually on child protection or care. Governments are now in discussions about what they're going to put in place after the Millennium Development Goals, which we should have reached by 2015. What would you suggest we should put in there in terms of targets for child protection?
I think child protection is really linking that every child matters. I think there's a huge need for the hierarchy to meet the child, and I don't mean physically, but they need to get a sense of the child. I think you need to find a way of that child having a voice, a way of the voice being heard in the right places. So to me, it's about the key people doing the training with the government officials and taking those skills into the community. I think it's about trusting that children don't lie. They don't lie. They might have a different truth to us, and it might develop over time to get to the real issue. But if a child is brave enough to tell you something is wrong, I think we need to be teaching authorities to listen to them and put in very, very safe guidelines that make sense. I think sometimes we put too much wordy stuff in there. It needs to be very clear and precise. And I think children need to know that people care enough to be putting this in around them.
Okay, so your focus is on training at all levels, both the therapists and the government officials, which is a very interesting angle, and making sure that the child has a voice.
Yes, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming along today, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.